From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Venezuela's Interior Minister has denounced a plan to stage false flag operations on the border with Colombia to undermine Venezuela's security. The plan had been mentioned by President Nicolas Maduro on Thursday. Reverol said the information came from sources within the Colombian armed forces.
We hereby denounce a serious and dangerous plan we have detected to create false flag events following an increase in violence on our border with Colombia. We have information and clear proof of the recruitment of Venezuelan citizens by the Colombian army. This is very serious, that the Colombian army should be recruiting Venezuelan citizens, giving them fast-track Colombian identity papers, ID cards, and then immediately incorporating them into Colombia's obligatory military service.
Que el ejército de Colombia esté realizando reclutamientos.
Brazil's President Michel Temer has declared a state of social emergency in the northern state of Roraima. He said this was in response to the influx of Venezuelans entering the country via the state capital, Boa Vista. The declaration will provide funding for infrastructure and humanitarian help to the 40,000 Venezuelans who have crossed the border. Temer will also double the number of troops in the area to 2,000, build more control posts, and a field hospital for migrants. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Arreaza is in the Dominican Republic as he continues his tour of the region to promote peace and integration. Our correspondent Esther Yanes has more from Santo Domingo.
Saludos desde Santo Domingo.
Greetings from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, the last stop of Venezuelan Foreign Minister Arreaza's dignity tour that has also brought him to Dominica and El Salvador. This marks the end of his Latin American tour. Next week, he heads to Europe and Africa. Today, the minister will meet with his counterpart, Foreign Minister Miguel Vargas, and later on, he will meet with different social movements and organizations that came from all over the country to show their support and solidarity to Venezuela. The purpose of his tour is to strengthen friendship ties with other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean ahead of Venezuelan elections on April 22nd. This stop in the Dominican Republic is particularly important because it was here where the Venezuelan government, a bit more than a week ago, signed the Peace and Unity Agreement, an agreement that the opposition decided not to sign after a phone call from the Colombian president at the request of U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who also threatened Venezuela with new sanctions and an oil embargo. These topics and more will be discussed by Arreaza and his counterpart Vargas.
The indigenous people in the Colombian department of Choco have fallen victim to the violence between the government and the ELN. In January, Colombian forces bombarded a remote area called San Juan Litoral. Many of those bombs landed close to the homes of the Wunan people. Our correspondent Lorena Hoyos traveled to the region to assess the damage. And this is the second part of a special series.
It's dawn, and uncertainty takes over the safe house in the Wunan community. The indigenous people here take us through the road that leads to Tordo River. Our boots are covered with mud, making this journey slower. It is painfully apparent how close the homes of this community are to the area bombarded by the military last month.
These huts that are burnt, those are not the guerrilla. They belong to the indigenous, the campesinos. We go away to hunt for 3 or 4 days. That is how we protect the community and how we get food.
The indigenous people use the word jury to say war, and that is how Selimon describes this attack. That night he was with his family at the hut when the roar of the explosion forced them to flee. They were forced to hide in the river to save their lives.
We heard a small plane above our hut. I told my family we are not going to give up. I took a canoe and went to the river. We stayed there until dawn, and as we came back, we saw all the destruction.
The women of the community remember scared kids running that night. They say that from that day, fear has taken over their lives, and they can no longer go to the mountains to harvest plant fibers to knit their crafts. They only have limited supplies left, and they fear that they will not be able to survive.
Everything we need, soap, salt, food, we buy with the money we get from our crafts. Most of the women here knit to be able to do that. And if we don't, how are we going to buy anything?
The Wunan have survived neglect and abandonment from the Colombian state. 2 years ago, the government built a health center to help the Afro-Indigenous community, but the doctors never came. And with time, promises were forgotten.
Every person in the community, Afro and Indigenous, are sons of the government. They need to have peace, not violence or bombardments on their territory.
The Wunan Indigenous hold on to their culture and traditions. Carlos Julio heals the illnesses of the community with medicinal plants, something he learned from his father. He said the worst illnesses are consequences of fear. Fear forces the soul, or chimya in Wunan dialect, to abandon their bodies.
Big scares force the spirit to leave the body and stay where that happened. Then you get sick, and if you don't consult with someone who knows about this, you can die.
The Wunan say that since the attack, several indigenous people have fallen ill.
War is very hard. We had to endure the attacks, the needs we have to face because we cannot go to the mount. If the public force sees us there with boots, they may think we are guerrillas. It's hard for us. We're not living in peace.
For the Wunan people, calm is peace. In the last 7 years, this community has been attacked 4 times, killing 3 indigenous girls. They are hopeful that the ELN and the government will reach a ceasefire agreement. They say that that is the only way they can preserve their lives.
A leader of Colombia's ELN guerrillas was arrested on Thursday in Bogota on suspicion of planning 2 attacks on police earlier this month, which killed 7 and left dozens wounded. Our correspondent in Bogota, Jose Manuel Jimenez, has the details.
Military forces and the General Prosecutor's Office announced the detention of Rafael Botero, who is part of the National Liberation Army leadership. He has been accused of recruiting minors into the ELN in different parts of the country. Colombia's Attorney General has asked Interpol to issue red notice arrest warrants for the ELN's commanders and other members of the guerrilla group.
Noam Chomsky is possibly the world's most renowned linguist and one of the foremost intellectuals in recent decades. In an exclusive interview with Telesur, he talked about foreign intervention in politics, the challenges facing society, and the role of U.S. President Donald Trump.
From the point of view of U.S. power, he's harming it. But from the point of view of U.S. elites, he's giving them everything they want. I mean, in fact, what's going on in the United States, if you think about it, is kind of a 2-level wrecking ball, if you want to call it that. Trump, his role, whether this is conscious or not, I don't know, but you can see what's happening. Trump's role is to ensure that the media and public attention are always concentrated on him. So every time you turn on a television set, it's Trump. They open the front page of the newspaper, Trump. And while this show is going on in public, in the background, the wrecking crew is working. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, the guys in the cabinet who write his executive orders. What they're doing is systematically dismantling every aspect of government that works for the benefit of the population. This goes from workers' rights to pollution of the environment, rules for protecting consumers. I mean, anything you can think of is being dismantled. And all efforts are being devoted kind of almost with fanaticism to enrich and empower their actual constituency, which is super wealth and corporate power.
And that is happening at the peril of the planet. Chomsky says warnings about global warming and the impact of the use of petroleum have fallen on deaf ears.
Who know that what they're doing is destroying the prospects for organized human life, and do it anyway because they make more profit tomorrow. Can you think of an analog to that in human history? I really can't. I mean, I've said sometimes what's considered an utterly outrageous comment that today's Republican Party is the most dangerous organization in human history. It sounds outrageous, but think about it for a moment. I mean, Hitler didn't intend to destroy the prospects for human existence. Attila the Hun didn't intend that. Nobody has. But that's what these guys intend.
The other threat, nuclear war, which he says is becoming more of a reality.
And it's not a joke. It's global warming and nuclear war. Those are the major issues. They ought to be big headlines every day. And Trump's actions are making both of them much more dangerous. In the case of nuclear war, the policies are significantly increasing the threat of nuclear war.
And then there's the question of whether the United States is fit to play the role of the world's police, or whether this is just interference.
Well, the concept of humanitarian intervention is a very interesting one. Almost every act by any great power aggressive act is justified on humanitarian grounds. So from the point of view of the aggressor, it's a humanitarian intervention, not from the point of view of the victims.
And you can see more of this Tell Us Your exclusive interview with Noam Chomsky online on our webpage at tellusyourtv.net/English. So we'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. A date has been set for the trial of famed Mexican drug lord El Chapo, but his lawyer says the defense doesn't have enough money to properly prepare. Joaquin Guzman will be tried in a U.S. court on September 5th on charges of drug trafficking and conspiracy. Guzman has been in solitary confinement in a prison in New York since he was extradited to the United States in January of last year. 60-year-old Guzman is accused of running a global cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine operation. He wanted to address the court to discuss his health and jail conditions, but was not allowed to. The head of the Organization of American States Anti-Corruption Mission in Honduras, Juan Jimenez, has resigned over the lack of support from authorities in the country and differences with the OAS leadership. Jimenez posted a letter on Twitter describing the situation of the anti-corruption mission in Honduras. He also attributed his decision to his differences of opinion with Luis Almagro, the Secretary General of the organization, and lamented the negative reaction from the Honduras government over his investigation of more than 140 congressmen on corruption allegations. Dominican teachers have called for a national strike to protest against new measures by the government. Let's go to our correspondent, Desi Toussaint, in Santo Domingo for more.
The Dominican Teachers Association has called for a 48-hour strike that began on Thursday and will end this Friday in all public schools in Santo Domingo. This after the Ministry of Education called in November last year for a contest to fill out the positions of directors in regional and district schools. The Teacher Association says that there wasn't a consensus or a dialogue with the authorities. Some of the schools have not replied to this call by the teachers since they believe a protest can be held in a different way without suspending classes. But there are many schools like the one behind me that have joined the strike.
The government of Colombia and the Agrarian Summit will meet to finalize the agreements signed in 2013 and 2014 with the indigenous peoples, the Afro community, and campesinos. The first meeting started on Wednesday in a debate about cocaine crops, marijuana, and poppy cultivation. They also discussed the assassination of various leaders and human rights activists. On the second day, the Agrarian Summit insisted the Administrative Department of Statistics of Colombia provide legal recognition for farmers. The Agrarian Summit is pushing for aspects of the pact to be upheld, like the protection of social leaders and punishment for the assassination of the more than 219 social leaders in recent years. The organization suspended negotiations last year, alleging that there was a lack of political will by the government of Colombia. Ecuador's Chota Valley is a region known not just for carnival, but also for football players and boxers. As one of the poorest regions in Ecuador, they use sports to help their families financially. Ivan Castaneda and Mariana Gongora bring us their stories.
Chota Valley is one of the only places in Latin America where Afro-descendant communities were established in the Andes and not next to the ocean. They were brought here as slaves by the Jesuits to work in the plantations.
And Juncal is created by immigrants from Caldera, from La Concepcion, from La Loma, from Cuajara, from Pambacienda. They came here escaping from the other haciendas, or maybe they were taken out of other haciendas, so they got here and formed this community.
This valley is known especially for its boxers and football players that have become famous on various teams in different parts of the world, having won numerous boxing and football championships. But even with all these great athletes, government, private investment, and education in the region is still lacking. Children here still look at sports as the only way of helping their families to fight poverty in their homes.
The Valley of Chota and Juncal is characterized by being an area that is immersed in poverty. It is an area where social inequality is very noticeable, and sports have been seen as a mechanism to close the gaps of social inequality.
Yes, it is a sport to help my family, my mother, my dad, my grandparents, and also the elderly who need one.
I'm encouraged. I like to push myself to be able to fight well, to train, and to have respect. I help my mom at home. For example, when she's sweeping, I try to help her with whatever she's doing.
I like it when we play a lot of football. I score a goal, I feel joy, happiness. I feel more in my heart that I have played more football.
Time now for another break. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
canalizing a river, grafting a fruit tree, educating a person, transforming a state. These are instances of fruitful criticism and, at the same time, instances of art. On the critical attitude, Bertolt Brecht.
Welcome back. Following 8 years of austerity policies, the streets of Athens are falling apart due to a lack of maintenance. This, along with chaotic urban planning, makes the city increasingly difficult for people who use wheelchairs or those with limited mobility.
Sotiris knows how difficult it is to move around these streets. He was born with achondroplasia and didn't take his first steps until he was 6 years old.
Despite the difficulties, I go out and try to do the things I want to do. But doing what you want isn't always easy, because I have to consider how accessible places are going to be.
The elevator down to the subway is out of order, so we help him use the escalator. Austerity policies mean that utilities like this break down regularly.
There is money, but it's misused. So utilities are not repaired and they become unusable.
There are many places in the city where he can't go, so he must carefully plan his journey.
It's tragic to see how difficult it is, and it's not just the government's fault. People are at fault too. For example, they know that ramps on sidewalks are for wheelchairs, yet they still block the ramps with their cars.
The first thing you notice about Alexandra is her vitality. She's a Paralympic swimmer who's been in a wheelchair since she was 7. She approaches the city with confidence. She says she would prefer to fall out of her wheelchair than to be stuck inside.
On the sidewalks, usually there are trees or staircases, or the sidewalk is broken.
Because of this, she travels around on the road despite the city's heavy traffic.
It would be nice to have better streets, with well-placed streetlights, and without any potholes.
Despite winning plenty of medals, Alexandra has to pay for her own plane tickets to get to competitions. She receives no public or private aid, along with Sotiris. They are examples of the struggle those with limited mobility face every day.
And now here are some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
Israeli demonstrators gathered in Tel Aviv calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to step down after police recommended that he be charged with bribery in 2 corruption cases. This after police said on Tuesday that enough evidence had been found for Netanyahu to be charged. Netanyahu has denied the allegations, but according to a poll published on Wednesday, almost half of Israel's electorate believe the police over the Prime Minister. The former Oxfam official Van Houwemayen, who is at the heart of a sex abuse scandal, said on Thursday that he made mistakes when working in Haiti for Oxfam, but denied paying for sex with prostitutes or abusing minors. According to Houwemayen, he was lured into a trap.
In Liberia, I was lured into a trap. I was so stupid to take part in a party at a pub. Actually, it was a dancing party during which girls jumped around scantily dressed. My English deputies invited me. I also danced. Afterwards, it turned out that they were prostitutes. I also danced with them at the party. Only danced. And I was sanctioned for this. I believe that was right. I believe that I should have acted more firmly there. I regret that.
The top United Nations human rights official Zaid Rad Al Hussein has called on Iran to halt executions of young people convicted of carrying out crimes when they were under the age of 18. Through his spokesman, Al Hussein called on the country to abide by international law.
He notes a surge in the number of juvenile offenders being executed in Iran and calls on the country to abide by international law and immediately halt all executions of people sentenced to death for crimes committed when they were under 18 years old.
German-Turkish journalist Deniz Yücel is being freed from a Turkish jail after being detained for 1 year. The Die Welt journalist was arrested in Istanbul and accused of writing propaganda in support of terrorism. His case has been an irritant in German-Turkish relations. A breathtaking dragon dance amid molten iron awed spectators in Kunming city of southwest China's Yunnan province on Thursday evening, which was the Lunar New Year's Eve. A group of folk artists splashed molten iron of 1,500 degrees Celsius into the air while the dragon dance was carried out amid the firework-like sparkles.
We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sydney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.